Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, do you still have that weird feeling of new year, new me, or filled with optimism about the new year of opportunities ahead? What are you going to be doing differently this year, and how will tech stop you from falling back to your old habits in week 3 of January? Any tips, please share with me by emailing me as always to techblogwriter@outlook.com. Now, regular listeners will remember that I think it was way back in 2018, I learned about how Pypestream was on a mission to make life easier by allowing businesses to connect with their customers through a secure channel, which they referred to as the pipe. And that pipe would provide an on-demand sales, marketing and support service. Now, by leveraging a combination of AI-powered robots and human agents within that pipe, I learned how companies were able to streamline their customer engagements to garner exceptional cost savings while maintaining high levels of customer satisfaction. In short, tech and humans working together. And at the time, it was the CEO of Pypestream, Richard Smullen, that discussed the major shifts taking place in the uses of AI and data and how that shift is already bringing brands and customers closer together. But nearly 3 years is a long time in tech. So this time around, I've invited Liam Delap from Pypestream onto the podcast, not to be confused with Liam Delap from Man City. Let's clear that one up before we begin. And Liam's going to discuss how AI, chatbots, and using AI can automate the customer experience. And also we're going to talk about the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the customer experience and the technological changes that they've had to face along the way. So buckle up and hold on tight so you can join me in conversation with Liam Delap from Pypestream. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. And Neil, thanks a million for having me on today. My name's Liam Delap, and I serve as our Director of Enterprise Solutions at Pypestream, a conversational AI and digital experience transformation company that's really changing the way people do business, everything from sales to support, and even to internal employee automation. So thanks for having me on the show today.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And I did speak with Richard Smullen, the CEO of Pypestream, back in 2018 on this podcast when the world was a very different place to what it is now. But for anyone that missed our original conversation, can you just remind the listeners of the kind of problems that you're solving with for your customers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at the highest level, if you think about, the digital first organizations that are now kind of dominating the market, companies like Uber, Netflix, Lemonade Insurance, Amazon, these are all companies that have really come into significant strength over the course of the last 5 to 7 years and have left a lot of the legacy organizations in those industries in the dust as it relates to digital experiences and making it extremely effortless and easy to transact. So Pypestream was created out of the notion that, it shouldn't just be those companies that are easy to do business with. Any company, even a legacy company that's been around for 100 years, should be allowed to simply, use technology and professional services to turn on these incredible, transactional, personalized, integrated experiences for their customer without having to spend, many years and millions of dollars to do so. So, that's what we do in a custom nature for every single organization and brand we work with. And the results have been incredible. Instead of just looking at it through the lens of how do we reduce phone calls and save money, we're also looking at it through the lens of how do we generate revenue and create a customer that we can retain, right? I think Shep Hyken in one of his books says, it's not just about gaining a customer, it's about keeping that customer. And so if you think about what's the most effortless way to do business, folks are going to choose the path of least resistance. And we help companies get there in a very short time frame with a full end-to-end technology stack and supporting professional services.
And I think many are saying that the last 12 months, it almost feels like it's been a digital accelerant of sorts. And I think Microsoft said a few months ago that it feels like that many businesses have squeezed 2 years of digital transformation into 2 months. And of course, you guys are working with many Fortune 1000 organizations to transform their customers' digital experience. But are there any stories or use cases that you could possibly share that just help anyone listening understand how you're doing that and how it might work in their world?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just finished listening to your podcast that you just released, and that was one quote that stood out to me. It's incredible. I think, when there's natural urgency, it's amazing what organizations can get done. And I think one of the biggest competitors to folks not moving forward with Pypestream or even any technology like Pypestream is them doing nothing, right? Our biggest competitor is not organizations selecting a different technology. It's actually them just deciding not to do anything because there wasn't urgency. But this year has changed all of that. I think a good use case, a very, very simple use case for this is in the retail space with order statusing, right? So as we all know, retail and e-commerce has only gone up significantly during the pandemic for obvious reasons. You can't go to brick and mortar stores. And you would be amazed to learn the amount of phone calls and emails and tickets that get generated over people asking a simple question that we've all come to expect, because we all come to expect the same level of service that we get from Amazon, where you can see your order in real time. I mean, I know more about where my order is than probably where my wife is right now, right? So it's pretty funny when you think of it that way. And so because everyone's expecting that, you go and you do a good thing. You may work with this smaller e-commerce business. You're like, maybe it's not going to be 2 days delivery. It's not Amazon Prime, but I'm just going to get it anyway. And then you look for the order status and it's nowhere to be found. And so that generates a call, and that call can cost anywhere between $4 to $5. And frankly, by that point, the bit I keep telling people is I think the business has failed the customer. You should never force a customer to make a phone call for something that simple. So we actually have seen a number of companies come to us with this urgent demand just to stand up a solution that can do one use case. And that use case might just be order status. And we actually stood up a solution for a company between the contract being signed and it going live was 7 business days, which we thought was incredible and provided immediate relief to the business that's now helping to self-fund other avenues of digital transformation across that enterprise.
And if we had this conversation 12 months ago, especially around things like AI and automation, there was a certain element of caution, maybe even suspicion from some businesses, but all that is changing now. I'm curious, how are you seeing large enterprises implementing AI and automation, but at scale? Is there anything that you can share on that?
Yeah. The one thing that we see a lot also, I would say, as I mentioned, our biggest competitor is them doing nothing. Our second biggest competitor is actually, and when I say I mean the royal me, the conversational AI industry. Their second biggest competitor is organizations that have this belief that they can build it in-house on their own. And we see some folks do that successfully, but very high percentage of organizations fail to do that effectively in an efficient way. And so, that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot is these companies are prioritizing digital transformation, but if it takes you 3 years to define your strategy, there's a lot of opportunity cost in not just making an investment and standing up a solution quickly that can, actually allow you to learn a lot about how this technology works and how your customers interact with it, and use that as data that, helps influence your further strategy. So I think, the concept of failing fast or succeeding quickly is huge. And I think by partnering with organizations that have hundreds of people who every single day focus on this one specific technology is likely going to generate better results than you trying to build a team from scratch internally, maybe of 5 people. Likely it's not going to generate the same outcomes and best practices that a dedicated company of 200 people will be able to deliver in a much faster time frame, because they have the battle scars. They know where the landmines are. They know the best practices, and they're able to scale that and share those practices across every deployment that they do. And with each iteration and each deployment, they learn more and more and are able to, refine, what best practice means, what customers truly want, and how to provide it to companies in the most efficient manner possible.
And there does seem to be a whole lot of buzz around AI and automation at the moment. So how can businesses help their products or services stand out from the crowd now and offer something different? Is there anything you're seeing there?
Yeah, I think it's certainly the concept of like being able to brand a solution in a way that makes it look different, right?
Yeah.
There's thousands of, as you mentioned, there's thousands of companies that are offering conversational AI solutions. A lot of them, whether for better or for worse, can make the mistake of assuming a one size fits all approach is the right answer. So even though every e-commerce company has an order status issue, you still want to put some thought into who your customer is. What are the demographics of your standard, ideal customer, and how do they want to be spoken to? With what tone do they want to be spoken to? How should we make it a button, or should we force them to type out a question? What would be easier for this audience? That level of thought will generate a significant variance in results. And by making it look branded and something that looks easy to use, you're going to drive higher engagement versus making it more of an open-ended type of NLU forced discussion where lots of folks over the last 10 years have been burned by that. I mean, we all can think of many examples of when we've gone to a website and there was this automated assistant and we asked it a question, and it feels like almost the majority of the time it never got it right. So now if you offer that same experience, but even though you've spent millions of dollars making it really good, my immediate notion before I even try to use this thing that you just put your blood, sweat, and tears in is that it's not going to work, and therefore I may not even try it. So how do you differentiate that entryway to drive engagement? And what we see in that is making something like a swiping gesture or maybe like a really fun button to click on will help them believe that, oh, this thing's intuitive. It knows me. It knows what I want. And it's helping me. I feel like I'm making progress towards issue resolution versus what everyone's used to, which is this open-ended NLU that just points them to a different URL and actually doesn't really help them accomplish their task. And I think defining one of those, the FAQ side as a knowledge-based bot, and then the transactional and personalized side as a transactionally based bot, really putting time to thinking about the importance of both of those and how they come together and how they're branded and how you're actually engaging your customers with those will be a tremendous and worthwhile strategy if you're looking into investing in any type of technology like this.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because, like you said, I think we've all come across those bad examples of bots. But is there a secret to creating a more unique approach to natural language understanding, or is that part of your secret sauce?
Yeah, no, it's a loaded question. I think obviously, I'd be hypocritical to say it applies the same way for everyone. It really doesn't. I think natural language understanding is a useful tool, but it's not the most important thing to conversational AI. And that's a hot take. And some folks some of the listeners might disagree. Yeah. My position on that is for the vast majority of businesses, 10 things or less represent 80% or more of phone calls and tickets. So why not make it extremely easy for someone to click on a button that essentially emulates one of those 10 things versus putting it in the hand of technology to potentially make a mistake by making it more open-ended. So a good example of this that Richard Smullen uses is imagine every time you went to order an Uber, it was an open-ended thing, chat. And you had to actually ask it for a car. And then it said, what kind of car do you want? And then you had to reply with the type of car you want. That would be an NLU based Uber experience. And if you did an A/B test of 1,000 people and surveyed them and asked them to do that versus the current Uber experience, which is you open it, you swipe it and it's there. I think we all know that much more than 95% of people would rather just tap a button and have a car versus have this long conversation. So I think a lot of people make the mistake of putting so much investment and resources into natural language understanding when if they actually took the time to recognize their business problems, they would probably boil them down to 3 or 4 things. And if we already know those 3 or 4 things are the main reasons why we're going to generate meaningful results as a business, then why would we spend millions of dollars training an NLU? You don't need to do that. It's a multiple choice question, right? So NLU is very important to understand some components of a use case. But I think you can't answer that question without knowing what you're solving for and if that type of technology is even needed to get your customer the answers they need in the most effortless way.
I think for most decision makers, business leaders and IT directors, etc., they're currently fighting off phone calls, emails, and all with the same sales pitch about, hey, AI and automation, it's the next big thing, and trying to sell them a solution. And many of those won't even have AI or automation in them, of course. But I'm curious, are there any myths or misconceptions or gripes that you can share today about AI or automation that we can finally lay to rest?
Definitely. Anyone who tells you that they can automate your entire call center is likely incorrect for the main reason that phone calls can be good. Phone calls, and any customer experience professional as a listener knows that there are these moments of amazement that happen on certain phone calls. And that's not what automation is about in 2020. Maybe in 2050, this will be a different conversation. But in 2020, the conversation is just about not forcing customers to do things that they shouldn't need to call to do, things that are basic expectations, things like order status, like making a payment, submitting or looking up the status of a claim in the insurance space, maybe getting a product recommendation, or at least being able to query inventory. Hey, do you guys have this shoe in red in size 11, right? Those types of questions people expect companies to deliver, because the best companies in the space, Amazon as an example, are doing it every day. In order to be competitive with them, and in order to retain customers outside of that e-commerce arena, you need to do something similar. And you're not going to probably be able to figure it out in an effective way in-house. You're going to have to look to professionals to do that for you. So one of the myths is, phone calls are bad. No, they're not. They can be great. If someone's really upset about something, you might have a chance to keep that customer for life by having a conversation with them. And at this point, there's no technology or automation that can emulate the human experience, the empathy experience that person will have. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I think automation is about as good as the data that it can consume. So if you're speaking to a conversational AI company and you say to them, hey, our systems are so old, there's no way you'll ever be able to integrate with them. It's just not possible. And they say, no, don't worry, we'll be able to do it. I would think that maybe you have some other priorities in hand before you go to automation. I think your priority should be setting your infrastructure as an organization up for automation so that APIs can be available, so that data can be shared across different platforms. Because if you're not at a place where you can even share data across platforms internally, it's unlikely you're going to be able to effectively do that in a short amount of time to an external, vendor or solution. Because if I don't know, in order for me to know the status of your order, as an example, I need to know the status of your order. In the same way, if you called your call center and you told your call center agents that they're not allowed to use their computers today, when I call that call center agent, they're not going to really help me in any way. Well, if you can't enable your call center agents with data, then you certainly can't enable a vendor with data. So that's going to be a shortcoming as well.
And I'm curious, are there any trends that you're noticing in the conversations you're having with your customers, particularly around business development, and if there is, how are you helping them overcome these challenges? Because I suspect that for many people listening all over the world, there are going to be some pretty big things in common.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people look at this through the lens of we need to reduce staff, or we can't scale our customer service operations unless we put technology in place, which is certainly a fantastic place to start. But the more successful customers, or the more successful folks we've seen do it, are looking at it at a much bigger level, which is, how do we use this as a competitive differentiator, and such a unique experience that people want to come back to shop with us or do business with us. So it's not just about, automating an order status call. It's actually about providing this conversationally personalized shopping experience, like a virtual agent, to say, hey, tell me about your preferences. Based on those preferences and our availability, here's what we think you would love. Here's a promotional item. Here's actually a coupon. Let's get you through the entire customer buying process using this conversational assistant that can provide videos and images and the ability to see even directions to go pick it up, as an example. I mean, all of these things are driving meaningful business development growth. I think as it relates to using these experiences to improve your own, data maturity. I mean, certainly we see organizations using this type of technology to prioritize their product roadmaps, because now for the first time, you're able to have a real-time look into the way that people are communicating to your business and use analytics to use that as your voice of the customer. So you can look and query up what millions of people said last week, the tone with which they spoke to your business, the questions and keywords that they used. And you can now use that data to inform your marketing team to change their SEO strategy, or use that same exact data to prioritize an API that you need developed, because now the business case is clear. So it definitely plays a huge role in the feedback loop that organizations use when they ask the question of what do our customers want, a lot of the answers to those questions can be found using the analytics that a lot of these conversational AI solutions can generate.
As 2020 is almost in our rear view mirror now, we've done the doom and gloom. I'm trying to create a more positive narrative as we look towards 2021 and the opportunities ahead. So I've got to ask you, what excites you about your role in 2021 and the opportunities ahead?
Yeah, I think what excites me personally is the fact that, as I mentioned, the biggest threat or the biggest competitor was people doing nothing. And I think people are finally realizing that that's not a strategy anymore. So personally, I'm super excited about the growth that Pypestream is positioned for in 2021, because, I think 10 years ago, people talked about this type of technology, but if you ask them, hey, can I call your customer or can I see this in action? A salesperson would say, they would probably deflect the conversation. Well, now the technology is so good that people are actually leading with production solutions and showing folks that this is actually real. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is not something that seems like, a sci-fi movie. This is actually real technology that is changing people's, businesses for the better. And if you can actually demonstrate it to folks. And now that adoption's there and people see it working and they're actually becoming really comfortable using it as consumers themselves, it isn't a function of proving the value. It's a function of knowing the value is there and figuring out the fastest way to get started. And I think as the pendulum kind of shifts back that way and that tipping point occurs where people are realizing that they don't have a choice, I think it's just going to benefit. Obviously, it's going to benefit Pypestream, but I think it's going to personally benefit just the general consumer and the simplicity of doing business. And it actually will spark even more economic growth the more easy you can make it to purchase and buy goods. And I think technology like this certainly leads to that.
Well, I've loved having you on the podcast today. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening that would like to carry on this conversation, look you guys up online, see what kind of work you're doing, or even contact your team if they've got any questions. What's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, www.pypestream.com is an incredible website chock full of content and interactive, engaging content as well. So definitely go there. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me directly, Liam Delap on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter at Liam Delap CX.
Well, so much I loved about what we were talking about there, in particular the line it used that your biggest competitor now is people doing nothing, and also the fact that you know more about the status of your Amazon order than your wife's whereabouts. I know it's a joke, but at the same time, it highlights how the experience has changed for customers now and how everyone's needs have evolved so much in the last 12 months. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Neil. Thank you.
A huge thank you to Liam for coming on the podcast there, for discussing the latest trends in enterprise AI, the top use cases for conversational AI and customer experience automation, and also for sharing the critical ingredients to implementing natural language understanding for customer experience use cases. But we did cover a lot of ground today, so if there are any questions, insights, experiences that you would like to share on this podcast, let me know. If you want to come on the podcast and tell your story, I'm more than happy for you to do that again. That's why I created this platform. So please, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you do want to browse through over 1,400 interviews or find out more on how you can work with me. Whatever it is, I think we've got all bases covered. And the only thing left is for me to prepare for tomorrow's guest and give you all a genuine big thank you for tuning to listening to this podcast every single day. And hopefully you'll join me again, if not tomorrow, very soon. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.